This lesson is going to cover the elements of a complete sentence and serve as a sort of introduction to sentences and sentence structure. So in order to understand a complete sentence, you have to recognize that the group of words has to contain three elements. First, it must contain a subject, and in a moment I'm going to explain what a subject is and what I mean by that. Second, the group of words has to have a verb. And finally, in order to be a complete sentence, the group of words must express a complete thought. So let me give you some examples so I can demonstrate what I mean by this. The subject of the sentence usually comes at the beginning of the sentence, and it explains who or what the sentence is about. So for example, Anna had been playing tennis for years. In order to find the subject, you want to look toward the beginning of the sentence and ask yourself who or what that sentence is about. And in this case, the sentence is about Anna. She is doing the action in the sentence, so her name is the subject of the sentence. Let me give you another example. Rock climbing is fun. Again, in order to determine the subject of the sentence, look toward the beginning, and you can see here this sentence is about rock climbing. That's the subject of this sentence. Now in these two examples, they each only have one subject, but you can have a group of words that has more than one subject, and that's called a compound subject. So for example, pizza and hot dogs are delicious. You follow the same procedure. You look toward the beginning of the group of words and ask yourself who or what it's about. In this case, the sentence is about pizza, and it's also about hot dogs. So this is a compound subject because it contains two different subjects joined with the word and or. The second element of a complete sentence is the verb. So in order for a group of words to be a complete sentence, it must contain a verb. So looking back at our examples, the verb is the action of the sentence. It's what the subject of the sentence is doing. So in this first example, Anna is the subject, and what she was doing is she had been playing. So this is an action verb that tells you what the subject of the sentence is doing. However, there's another kind of verb that's a little bit trickier to identify. It's called a linking verb. Really, you just have to memorize them. So linking verbs are is, are, were, was, have, had, has. Students often overlook those words as verbs because they're not action. What they're doing is connecting the subject to the rest of the sentence or linking them. And they're short words, so it's very easy to think that they don't contain any information, but they do constitute the verb of the sentence. So looking at our second example, rock climbing was our subject. The verb in this case is. So this is a complete sentence. It has a subject, a verb, and a complete thought, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. Looking at the final example here, pizza, hot dogs are the subject. There's a linking verb, are. So all of these are complete sentences because they have these elements. In order to understand complete thought, I need to introduce another concept to you, which is something called a clause. A clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. So all of these are clauses. There are two different kinds of clauses. The first kind is an independent clause. An independent clause has a subject, verb, complete thought. An independent clause is the same as a complete sentence. The second type of clause, however, is called a dependent clause. That group of words has a subject, it has a verb, but it does not express a complete thought. And the reason that it doesn't is because it begins with a word called a subordinating conjunction. And here's an example. I had my independent clause, but I added because to the beginning, which is a subordinating conjunction, and I'm going to give you a list of these transition words, including subordinating conjunctions. Now I have because pizza and hot dogs are delicious. That has a subject, it has a verb, but you're left wondering, well, what happens because pizza and hot dogs are delicious? Do you eat them all the time? Do you overeat them? What is the result of this clause. So this is a dependent clause since it starts with that subordinating conjunction, which has made this no longer a complete thought. So going back to review, if you're trying to determine if what you've written is a complete sentence, you have to check, does it have a subject, does it have a verb, and does it express a complete thought?